We're at a milestone in my series on the 36 decans of the Zodiac today because we're at the sign of Leo. And so for the second time, we're looking at the element of fire. That's going to deepen our understanding of Leo by comparing it to Aries, for example. I'll discuss that in the upcoming video, as well as talk about the planets that rule the first decan or first 10 degrees of Leo, which is what we'll be discussing today. And that's Saturn and the Sun. And of course, we'll talk about the tarot card, the Five of Wands, that's associated with this decan, the numerology that brings that, deepens the meaning of that tarot card. And then I'll give you a couple of examples of people who have their rising degree in this part of the zodiac. Meryl Streep, the famous actress, and then Mahiedine, Mekhissi-Benabbad, forgive my pronunciation. He's a famous middle distance runner and there's just some interesting things about his chart that really emphasize the nature of this deck. And anyway, there's a lot to unpack. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, like and subscribe. It helps people find my content. So, Leo 1. I'm not gonna lie. I love this decan. It's a complex and sometimes difficult decan, but I have my Venus in this decan, and I know it well. It's in the 10th house for me. And so when we look at this decan, it's ruled by the sun, the sign itself, right? Leo is ruled by the sun, and all the other planets revolve around the sun. So immediately we have the image that something about Leo is going to have to do with being a centering force, right? Because it's the center that the planets revolve around. It shines bright and big and it warms us. So there's something warm about the Leo energy, as well as being this centering bright force in the universe. It's got a stability about it, the sun. Leo is a fixed sign, right? And that's, I think, representative too of the nature of the sun in general. Because if you think about the sun, it rises in the morning and it sets at night, and it rises in the morning and it sets at night. And so there's a consistent quality to it. Yeah. And then it also, so that's in general, Leo's a fixed sign, meaning it's got a stable quality and it's ruled by the sun. And then it's fire. And fire signs all have to do with inspiration, wanting to be free, wanting to shine one's light in the world, wanting to have freedom of movement and freedom of expression. And I'll compare it to the sign of Aries a little bit more when we're talking about the tarot card. But for now, let's focus on the first decan of Leo. We know that all the decans of Leo are going to share this quality of shining, wanting to shine brightly for the world, right? Because of that fixed energy of the sun. But the first decan of Leo is ruled by under the Chaldean order. It's ruled by Saturn, which is the last planet we can see with the naked eye. Saturn's about restrictions and boundaries and hard work and responsibility. He tends to reward us when we work hard. He shows us about what we can and cannot achieve in the material world. And he's also got this leaden kind of dark quality. So, under the Chaldean order, Saturn rules, but under the triplicity system, which is another system of rulership for decans, the sun is the ruler. And so the sun rules the sign overall, and then the sun and Saturn rule the decan. So we have sun, sun, Saturn, right? And sun and Saturn, in astrology, when you look deeply at the system, they're opposite each other, right? You have the sign of Leo opposite Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Leo is ruled by the sun. Because Saturn is so far away from the sun, it's dark out there. It's a leaden, heavy object. Also, part of the quality of Saturnine energy is a little bit of depressive darkness, right? He's the Lord of Death. The Grim Reaper is associated with Saturn as well, versus the sun, which is about life and photosynthesis and things shining, right? So we get a quality with this decan of sort of opposites, like a tension of opposites between the energy of wanting to shine brightly, but then feeling perhaps restricted around that shining, or feeling like one has to work really hard to achieve that capacity to shine in the world, or feeling like one is being observed and perhaps criticized as one shines in the world, because Saturn can have this quality of judgment, kind of that father figure that says, you should do this the right way. So we really are going to see that played out in the energy of the people who, like Meryl Streep, and the hard work she put in her career to achieve what she has achieved. But the fact that she has put in so much work to become the best actress that she can and face sort of that energy of the tension of the hard work of Saturn. So that's the planets that are responsible for the Decan. And then we can broaden our understanding of the Decan by looking at the tarot cards that are associated with it. Typically, I also talk about some ancient texts like Agrippa and Ibn Ezra, but they don't really add a lot here. The descriptions sort of mirror the energy of Leo itself. So we're going to set that aside for a minute and go right to the tarot cards. So when we look at the tarot cards that are, or card that's associated with this decan, we see that it's the Five of Wands. And here we see five young men with sticks, and they're kind of battling. They look pretty evenly matched. It's not clear who's going to triumph in the end, but you can see sort of the competitive nature of this. I'm turning around only so that I can grab my Thoth card, so I can tell you or show you that under the Crowley deck, the Thoth deck, the name of the card is Strife. So that just doubles down on the what we see in the cards, that there's something about this decan of Leo that's going to not have to do with just achieving and shining in the world, but encountering some sort of strife as we attempt to achieve and shine. So this is where it might be a good time to talk a little bit about comparing the energy of Aries to Leo. So first, just big picture, the first four signs of the zodiac all have a quality of the individual. The second four all have a quality of social, you and I. And the third four have something more to do with the greater world, the community at large. So if you look at the quality of Aries, Taurus, Cancer, and Gemini, those are all sort of about me personally struggling with fire energy when it's Aries, me personally struggling with earth and how I'm going to make my way in the world from a standpoint of financial stability with Taurus, and so on. And so Aries, if you go back and look at my videos on Aries 1, Decan 1, 2, and 3, it's about, like, Aries is the first sign. It's that fire of the world that wants to enter and prove its existence. It's about me achieving my light for myself and me gaining a certain sense of self-mastery and self-dominion, and then celebrating that in the third decan of Aries. And then as we break into the fire energy of Leo, now it's like I want to show who I am, not just for me, which is Aries, but I want to show it for the world. I want the world to see my fire, to admire me, to realize my achievements. And we can really get a sense of this if we look at the other two cards that are associated with the decans of Leo. This is the second decan of Leo. Here we're fighting to find our place in the second decan of Leo. We've won. It's the guy who's won the battle, and now he's riding high. He's got success around shining in the world. And then if we look at the third card associated, the Seven of Wands, here we see this guy who's, sort of achieved something, but now other people, he's having to hold steady, trying to hold on to what he's achieved as far as shining his light in the world. And we'll talk about those more as I talk about Leo 2 and Leo 3 in the upcoming videos. But just to give you a sense, we're breaking into, or we're trying to break our light out into the world to be admired. We're going to run into competition to have our light shine. It has everything to do with whatever kind of impediments we might run into as we try to bring our light into the world, including impediments around our own self-judgment and whether we're capable of doing this, and maybe even a little bit around our hesitancy to compete with other people. I know this on a personal level, that there can just be something a little bit scary about putting yourself out there, and there's something about this decan that requires a courage to step out and shine your light and test your mettle against people who may have equal capacity to you to try to break through. So that's the quality as far as the competitive nature. That's just really clear about this decan of the zodiac. And then let's also think about just the number 5 and a little bit of numerology as well as Kabbalah around, because it's the number 5 of wands. And so with the third decan of Aries, we had the Four of Wands. It's this celebration of the self. Fours all have to do with a containment, a structure. Think of the square, this steady energy, but you start to get a little bored with the fours and you're ready to break out into new territory, maybe achieve something new with the fives. And so there's a creative, even though it's a little tense and can be difficult, there's a creative energy around the number 5. We can really see this with the astrology. We have different angles in astrology, and the angle associated with the number 5 is a quintile, and that's 1/5 of 360 degrees of an astrology chart, and it's a 72-degree angle, right? And people who have quintiles in their birth chart tend to have a creative sense of who they are, a want of breaking out and breaking into something new. So I'm just going to read a little bit about quintiles to give you the vibe of this. Um, the quintile is a minor aspect that occurs when two planets are 72 degrees apart. It's associated with themes of creativity, talent, and unique expression, often indicating latent abilities or special gift to be developed, right? So this is the fifth harmonic, which relates to the number 5 and the symbolic associations with creativity and individuality. So we really see this expressed in Leo, because Leo is also a sign that has to do with creativity and individuality. Um, yeah, and then in Kabbalah, it is the Separat Gabora. And just to double down on some of the themes, because part of what I like to do with these videos is show you that it's not just one thing that shows the expression of the energy of this decan, but it's sort of a repeated dancing around of the archetype represented by this decan. And so with Gabora, give me 1 second to find this here. Um, it represents conflict or motion necessary for spiritual growth. It disrupts the harmony of the 4, the structure we were talking about before, to push toward the 6. The number 6 we're going to see with the second decan of Leo has to do with more beauty and harmony and reaching this place of stability and peace around that self-expression. But now we're like trying to get there. This motion is an essential part of the process. And then Gabora also has to do with sort of challenge as catalyst. 5s challenge stability to bring about evolution. And there's a sense of crisis and growth. The number 5 often appears where there's a breaking point or creative tension is required to move forward. So you see how that mimics the fact that we have Saturn and Sun, two opposing energies in a creative tension in this decan. And what it does is it hones this, the energy of this decan can hone the skills of the person who has planets or points in this decan because they want to shine, but they're faced with obstacles that force them to work really hard to because they're competing with other people. And you know how competition just leads to an improvement of our skills the more we compete with other people. And so that's kind of the vibe of this. So let's talk about the two people I have as examples who have their rising degrees in this part of the zodiac. First, we have Meryl Streep, who's widely regarded as one of the greatest actors of all time. She has been nominated for, I think, more Academy Awards than anyone else, 21, and she's won a number of them as well. And so when you think about Meryl Streep, she has been in so many movies, but what a lot of people don't understand is how much effort she puts into her acting and honing her craft. For example, she did a movie called Sophie's Choice, I think it was back in the 80s. And she actually learned Polish just so that she, and I think maybe even German as well, just so she could appear in that movie. That I've studied a lot of languages, and that is really difficult. In fact, I've studied German as well, which is one of the most difficult languages out there. Anyway, so she really prepared or prepares for her roles. And I'm going to give you a couple of quotes from her because I think they really show this. Um, it shows the Saturnine, the fact that Saturn is driving her solar energy, her desire to create here. So she said, there were a lot of times when I didn't get roles that I thought I deserved, but instead of giving up, I worked harder. Saturn, Saturn, Saturn. She also said, I wasn't the prettiest. I wasn't the most talented. I didn't have the best voice, but I worked really hard and I had a lot of determination. Once again, very Saturnine. And then there's also a quality of Leo, and particularly this decan, that also has to do with bringing forth our authenticity. The sun is not only representative of this centering energy, but it's also like our deep identity, right? It's got this quality of having to do with the deep, authentic self and bringing that forth. And Meryl Streep shows this in some of her expression, this solar energy, when she says, acting is not about being someone different. It's about finding the similarity in what is apparently different and then finding myself in there. So she's sort of focusing on connecting with her authentic voice, and that's part of what brings it forward. And then lastly, I talked about courage as being, the courage of being able to put yourself out there to the possibility of the Saturnine judgment from other people as being part of this energy of the Decan. And she said, you have to have courage to step out and be seen, but it has to be grounded in something real, your truth. So that kind of combines the idea of courage and connecting with that deep solar energy. Then the second person who I found, and I didn't know who this person was before, but I was sort of leafing through people with planets in this decan or points in this decan, and it's a middle distance runner. His name is Mahiedine Mekhissi-Benabbad. And I mean, he's super famous in the running world, no doubt. He's retired right now. He's from Algeria, and he mainly competed in the 3,000-meter steeplechase. And he's the only man to win 3 Olympic steeplechase medals, right? And he also got silver medals and so on. What's interesting about him, and I wonder if I can pull up his chart. Give me 1 second to see if I have access to it here. I do. Okay, so I'm going to think I'm going to pull it up so I can show it to y'all. Let me see if I can share screen. It really gives you a sense of the competitive. So first of all, I'll just say that one of the things he's most famous for, besides the fact that he won all these races and clearly is a very competitive person who had to work really hard to get there, but he's known for having this really kind of wicked temper around his competitive nature, having gotten in fights with other people he was competing with, as well as acting out at times. And what we see, and when I saw his chart, I was like, well, of course, he's got his ascendant. That ascendant degree is in the first 10 degrees of Leo. And it's in a T square to a Pluto-Mars opposition. So Pluto and Mars, when they oppose each other in a chart, can have to do with power struggles, with Pluto squaring his ascendant as well as Mars squaring his ascendant. It just seems inevitable that it's not only going to be about competition, but that competition at times may get a little bit violent, or he may be drawn to act out in the middle of his competitive sports in a way that's Martian, right? We got Mars and Taurus there. If you there's Mars and this is Taurus. If you know anything about Mars and Taurus, Mars doesn't do well there because Taurus is a Venus ruled sign. So you could see sort of difficulties arising for this person around that energy. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of an interesting example, not just of the Decans, but when astrology speaks, it speaks loudly. And I love to show great examples because it helps us all know that we're kind of little people here and that there's these bigger structures at work. Yeah, and that we're just following the energy of our karma. At least that's one of my sort of philosophical views of the world. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, again, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in about 10 days for Leo 2.